No one at the party noticed the quiet tension behind her smile. But that night was already unfolding into something Lena would never forget. The music was loud, the lights were warm, and laughter filled every corner of the house, yet none of it reached her. She stood near the entrance for a moment, adjusting the sleeve of her red dress. The same one Daniel used to say made her look unforgettable. Tonight, he hadn't even noticed it. Daniel had walked in ahead of her, greeting people, shaking hands, laughing easily like nothing in the world was wrong. Lena followed a few steps behind, watching him blend into the crowd as if she were just another guest instead of his wife. That small distance between them felt larger than the entire room. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time when Daniel would have waited for her, held her hand as they entered together, whispered something soft in her ear just to make her smile. Back then, even the simplest moments felt meaningful. But now, everything felt rushed, distant, incomplete. Lena forced a smile as someone greeted her. She responded politely, exchanged a few words, but her eyes kept drifting toward Daniel. He was across the room, already caught up in a group, laughing louder than she had heard him laugh in months. It stung, not because he was happy, but because he wasn't happy with her anymore. She moved slowly through the crowd, trying to feel part of something, but every conversation felt empty. People talked about plans, trips, goals for the new year, but Lena couldn't think past the present moment. She felt like she was standing still while everything around her moved forward. After a while, she slipped toward the balcony, needing air, needing space. The cold breeze hit her face, and for the first time that night, she felt something real. She wrapped her arms around herself and looked out at the city lights. Fireworks were already starting in the distance, small bursts of color against the dark sky. She thought about the past year, about all the quiet dinners where Daniel barely spoke, about the nights he came home late, tired but distant, about the times she tried to ask what was wrong, only to hear nothing, just work. At first, she believed him. Then she stopped asking. Crowded in there, isn't it? The voice was calm, unfamiliar, yet strangely comforting. Lena turned slightly and saw him standing a few steps away. Armand. She had seen him earlier talking to someone near the bar, but they hadn't spoken. Yes, she said softly. A little too much, he smiled. Not in a way that felt forced, but easy and natural. I come out here every time it gets loud. It helps clear the mind. Lena nodded. I guess I needed that too. There was a pause, but it wasn't awkward. It felt quiet in a good way. Are you enjoying the party? He asked. She let out a small breath, almost a laugh. Trying usually means no, he said gently. That made her smile, a real one this time, even if it was brief. Maybe. They stood side by side, not too close, just enough to share the space. Armand didn't push the conversation. He didn't ask too many questions. He just let the moment settle. After a few seconds, he spoke again. You don't seem like someone who enjoys pretending. Lena glanced at him, slightly surprised. Pretending. To be okay, he said simply. She looked away, her eyes returning to the lights outside. Maybe I'm just tired. That makes sense? He replied. His tone didn't carry judgment or curiosity, just understanding. It made something inside her loosen slightly, like a knot she didn't realize she had been holding. Inside, the music grew louder. Someone shouted, people cheered, and the energy of the party kept rising. But out here, it felt like a different world. Are you here with someone? Armand asked after a moment. Lena hesitated, then nodded. My husband, Armand, didn't react in a dramatic way. He simply nodded back. Is he inside? Yes. He didn't ask more. That silence said enough. Lena found herself speaking again without planning to. He used to hate parties like this. Said they were too noisy. And now? She looked down slightly. Now he fits right in. Armand followed her gaze toward the window, where Daniel was still laughing with others. People change, he said. Yes, Lena whispered. They do. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved gently around them, carrying distant sounds of fireworks and music. What about you? Lena asked, turning the question back to him. Why are you here if you don't like crowds? He smiled faintly. A friend insisted. I didn't want to say no. That's kind of you. Or weak, he joked lightly. Lena shook her head. No, it's kind. Their conversation stayed simple, but it flowed easily. They talked about small things, work, favorite places, random memories. Nothing too deep, nothing too heavy, yet every word felt genuine. For the first time in a long time, Lena felt like she wasn't forcing anything. She wasn't trying to be interesting or cheerful or strong. She was just herself. And somehow that felt new at one point. She laughed softly at something Armand said, and the sound surprised her. It had been a while since she heard that version of her own voice. You should do that more often, Armand said. What? Laugh like that. She looked at him, a little unsure. It's not something I plan. Maybe it should be, he replied. There was warmth in his words, but nothing inappropriate, nothing uncomfortable. Just a simple observation that stayed with her longer than she expected. Inside, the countdown was about to begin. People started gathering, voices rising, excitement building. Midnight, Armand said, glancing toward the door. Yes, Lena replied, but she didn't move. Are you going in? She hesitated. This was the moment. The moment couples shared, the moment people celebrated together. She should go to Daniel. She should stand beside him, smile, pretend everything was fine. But her feet didn't move. Instead, she stayed. I think I'll stay here, she said quietly. Armand nodded, respecting her choice. It's quieter. The countdown began, loud and full of energy. 10, 9, 8. Lena's heart started beating faster, but not from excitement. 7, 6, 5. She looked through the glass and saw Daniel. He was standing with others, not looking for her, not wondering where she was. 4, 3, 2. Something inside her shifted. 1. Cheers exploded. Fireworks lit the sky. And the world celebrated a new beginning. But Lena stood still on the balcony, not beside her husband, not pretending anymore, just standing there, next to someone who had seen her more clearly in one evening than Daniel had in months. She didn't reach for Armand. He didn't reach for her, but the space between them felt full of something unspoken, something real. And in that quiet moment, as the noise of celebration echoed around them, Lena realized that the night hadn't gone the way she expected. It had gone somewhere else entirely, somewhere she wasn't ready to name yet. But she knew one thing for sure: when the night ended, nothing would feel the same again. Lena woke up the next morning to sunlight spilling softly through the curtains, but the warmth didn't reach her. The night had left a strange weight in her chest, a mixture of confusion, relief, and something she couldn't yet name. The memories of the party lingered, the music, the laughter, the glittering lights, but most of all, the quiet moments on the balcony with Armand. Nothing had happened in a dramatic sense. No scandal, no shouting, no betrayals in action. Yet emotionally, Lena felt that something important had shifted. Something inside her had woken up. Daniel was already awake, or at least moving around. She heard him in the kitchen, pouring coffee, humming softly to himself. The sound which would have once made her heart flutter, now only reminded her how distant he had become. When he walked into the bedroom, his expression was neutral, casual. He didn't smile at her, didn't ask how she slept, didn't even comment on her red dress from the night before. You came home late, he said matter-of-factly. His tone was flat, like it was a simple observation rather than a question meant to open dialogue. Yes, Lena replied softly. Her voice didn't hold guilt or anger, just a quiet acknowledgement. Daniel seemed unbothered by it, already turning his attention to the morning routine. I was with friends, he added quickly, as if to explain his own late arrival. Lena only nodded. She didn't argue. She didn't demand explanations. That silence was heavy, heavier than any words could have been. The emptiness between them was loud. She realized in that quiet that she had been holding a lot of tension for months, maybe even years tonight. Or maybe it had started before tonight. She felt it start to shift. The next days passed in a blur of routine. But Lena's mind kept returning to the party. She thought about how effortless it had felt to talk to Armand. The way he had listened without judgment, the quiet kindness in his eyes. She thought about Daniel, how distant and distracted he seemed, how he never really saw her anymore. She began noticing little things she had ignored before the half-hearted conversations. The nights when he came home, exhausted but detached, the way he avoided meaningful talks. Each realization was small, but together they were undeniable. Then, one evening, as she was tidying up the living room, she saw Daniel's laptop open. A notification popped up, a message preview from someone she didn't know. Her hands froze, heart skipping a beat. Something inside her told her she should look away, leave it alone. But curiosity, mixed with the faint ache she had been carrying, got the better of her. She opened the message. It wasn't shocking in a violent way. There were no accusations, no explicit threats. But it was clear. Casual jokes, personal comments, the kind of friendly intimacy that wasn't meant to be shared with her. And there was more numerous messages over weeks, all of them showing Daniel connecting with someone else in ways he hadn't connected with her in years. Lena's chest tightened, her throat went dry. For a moment, she felt dizzy, like the world around her had tilted. It hurt not because he had crossed a physical line, but because he had been distant for so long, because the love she thought was mutual had been quietly redirected elsewhere, away from her, into someone else's presence. And all those months, all those nights she had tried to reach him had been met with polite indifference. The guilt she had felt about maybe not trying enough, or wondering if she had been too critical, evaporated instantly. She wasn't the one who broke first. Lena didn't cry that evening. She didn't shout or confront him. Instead, she sat by the window, gazing at the city below. Fireworks from weeks ago felt like yesterday, the memory of that balcony, of talking quietly with someone who listened, was vivid. The understanding hit her like a wave. What had seemed like her moral mistake at the party wasn't really a mistake at all. That night had been a turning point, not of wrongdoing, but of realization. She had been giving love to someone who had stopped recognizing it long ago. Days turned into quiet nights. Lena observed Daniel with a clarity she hadn't had before. Every little interaction, every dismissive word, every laugh that didn't include her, made her see the full picture. She stopped trying to force conversations, stopped asking questions, stopped seeking what wasn't there. There was a strange liberation in Ida lightness she hadn't felt in months. It was as if finally she was seeing reality clearly. And reality didn't have to hurt anymore. In the midst of her reflection, her thoughts often drifted back to Armand, though she didn't contact him immediately. The connection they had shared felt honest, uncomplicated, and free of judgment. It wasn't about replacing Daniel or seeking revenge. It was about recognizing someone who made her feel seen in a way she hadn't for a long time. That realization didn't bring guilt. It brought clarity, understanding that she deserved to be with people who truly appreciated her presence. One evening, Daniel tried to engage. He asked about her day, his tone casual, but there was an undercurrent of uncertainty in his voice. Lena answered, calm, collected, careful with her words. There was no bitterness, no outpouring of emotion, only observation. He noticed, finally, that something had changed. His questions were met with polite responses, his attempts at intimacy with gentle, measured distance. Lena had drawn a quiet line that he couldn't cross. Time passed, and Lena's inner world began to change. She started noticing herself again, the small joys, the things she liked, the comfort in her own thoughts. She stopped seeking validation from someone who had long stopped providing it. Her mornings became hers alone, her routines infused with self-respect. And in that quiet transformation, she found strength she hadn't known existed. Then, the unexpected happened. Daniel's phone buzzed in the living room while he was out. Lena, almost instinctively, glanced at it. Messages popped up, brief and playful, from the same person. She didn't feel rage this time. She didn't feel the need to confront immediately. She simply recognized a pattern she had suspected, confirmed it, and let it settle. There was no dramatic confrontation. There was no shouting match. There was only understanding. Daniel's actions, his emotional absence, had created the conditions for their relationship to quietly unravel. Lena had nothing left to repair. One evening, she sat again at the edge of the balcony, the city lights sprawling beneath her. The wind was soft, carrying the faint hum of distant traffic and the subtle laughter from nearby apartments. For a moment, she allowed herself to reflect not on betrayal, but on growth. The party, the encounter with Armand, the quiet moments of recognition, they all led to this calm clarity. She wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She was awake, aware, and free in her mind. Her phone buzzed. A message from Armand. "I hope you're doing okay." Lena smiled softly. She didn't reply immediately. She didn't need to. The message wasn't urgent, wasn't demanding. It was a gentle reminder that some people come into your life quietly, not to change it for you, but to show you what is possible. That night, Lena allowed herself to breathe, to accept the truth that sometimes the hardest awakenings come gently, through realization rather than drama, and in that quiet acceptance, she found an unexpected strength. The life she had once thought perfect wasn't broken, it was simply shifting into something more honest. Something that respected her, her emotions, and her capacity to recognize love, tension, and care where it truly belonged. She understood now that the party hadn't been a mistake. It had been a revelation, a soft, gentle unveiling of what had been hidden in plain sight. The days that followed were not dramatic. There were no public confrontations, no shouting matches, no explosive arguments. Just quiet observation, subtle shifts in behavior, and a slowly growing confidence in her own judgment. Lena noticed small things: Daniel's continued indifference, the way he failed to engage, the absence of meaningful connection. She let it confirm what she already knew. She didn't need to beg for attention. She didn't need to plead for love that had evaporated months ago. With each passing day, Lena felt more grounded. The past, the moments of hurt, the nights of longing, they existed, but they no longer dictated her emotions. She recognized her own worth, her own capacity to choose wisely, and the importance of noticing when love is no longer mutual. The gentle freedom she felt was unfamiliar at first, but quickly became comforting. She started making small plans for herself, things that mattered to her. Walks in the evening, visits to favorite cafes, time to read, to think, to breathe. She reconnected with herself in a way she hadn't realized she needed. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It didn't involve shouting or tears. It came quietly, through recognition and reflection. Lena understood that Daniel's emotional drift wasn't her fault, that her longing, her attempts to reconnect, her soft love, they were valid and beautiful, but not enough to compensate for someone else's absence. She no longer felt guilt for thinking about Armand, or for acknowledging that emotional fulfillment can come in unexpected forms. By the end of that week, Lena felt a soft sense of calm that had eluded her for months. The weight of unspoken emotions, the tension of pretending, the confusion of loving someone distant, all of it had started to lift. She wasn't angry, she wasn't resentful, she wasn't consumed. She was awake, aware, and moving toward a clarity that had been absent for far too long. Lena felt the shift inside her more clearly than ever. The quiet mornings, the soft realization of her worth, and the understanding of Daniel's emotional absence had built a kind of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She no longer chased conversations or sought approval from someone who had stopped seeing her. Every day, she noticed herself standing taller, thinking clearer, and moving with a calm confidence that felt entirely new. She had spent so long trying to keep a connection alive that was already fading. And now, for the first time, she understood that letting go wasn't a weakness. It was clarity. Daniel noticed too. At first, he thought it was relief. Lena was no longer asking questions or pressing him for attention. He assumed things would feel easier, lighter. But as the days passed, his relief turned to confusion. Lena's calmness wasn't ignorance or tolerance. It was awareness. She had stopped pretending that the cracks in their marriage could be patched with small gestures or empty words. She had stopped waiting for him to change. She had stopped trying to fix what was already broken. One evening, Daniel asked casually, almost as if testing the waters, "Are you upset with me?" Lena looked at him steady, without anger or reproach. "No," she said softly. "I'm not upset. Just aware." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made Daniel falter. He tried to explain himself, to justify the weeks of emotional absence, the missed conversations, the subtle distance. But Lena didn't argue. She didn't insist. She didn't even need to raise her voice. Her calmness spoke louder than any argument ever could. For years, Lena had measured love by presence, attention, and effort. Daniel had given glimpses of love, but they had always been fleeting, inconsistent. A patchwork of effort that faded into absence. Lena had clung to those fragments, hoping that one day they would form a whole. But the party, the quiet balcony, the honest conversation with Armand, they had opened her eyes. She realized that love could not exist in absence, that a bond could not thrive when one person had already drifted away. The clarity hit her gently, without drama, yet it was unshakable. Daniel tried to reconnect in small ways. He asked about her day, offered compliments, suggested they spend time together. But Lena met each gesture with measured calm, not coldness, but deliberate observation. She noticed the difference between effort and authenticity, between attention and genuine connection. She realized that his attempts now were too little, too late. He hadn't nurtured the bond when it mattered most, and that absence had created a space Lena could no longer ignore. In the quiet of her mornings, Lena began to plan small things for herself. She walked along the river in the evenings, feeling the crisp air fill her lungs. She visited her favorite cafe and allowed herself to sit in thought, savoring the warmth of a cup of coffee without rushing through the moment. She read books she had forgotten, listened to music she loved, and allowed her mind to rest. Each of these small acts, seemingly ordinary, became acts of reclaiming herself. She was rediscovering her own presence, her own capacity for joy independent of anyone else. Armand's presence in her thoughts grew, not as a distraction, but as a symbol of what genuine connection felt like. He had listened without judgment, had noticed without interfering, and had treated her with respect and patience. Lena didn't rush into anything with him. She didn't seek a relationship or closure. Instead, she allowed the memory of their conversation to remind her that emotional fulfillment was possible, that someone could see her for who she truly was, and that she deserved that recognition. Meanwhile, Daniel's confusion deepened. He didn't understand why Lena no longer sought his attention, why she no longer pressed for conversations, why she no longer reacted with frustration or pleading. His attempts to reestablish the connection felt awkward and forced. Lena, however, met each interaction with a gentle steadiness that he could neither break nor manipulate. She had stopped giving him power over her emotions. She had stopped giving him control over her happiness. One evening, Daniel finally confronted the truth he had been avoiding. He said softly, "I feel like something's changed between us. I don't understand it." Lena looked at him, her eyes steady, her tone calm. "You don't need to understand it," she replied. "You've already shown me who you are. I just see it clearly now." The words weren't meant to wound, but they carried a force that left Daniel silent. For the first time, he realized that his absence, his distractions, his quiet detachment had consequences. Lena's clarity was a mirror, reflecting his own choices back at him. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no tears, just understanding. Daniel tried to explain, tried to justify, tried to reclaim the emotional ground he had lost over months of indifference. But Lena had already crossed into a space of calm awareness. She no longer needed validation, no longer needed explanations, no longer needed him to fill spaces he had abandoned. She had found her own strength, and it was unshakable. In that clarity, Lena also recognized the quiet beauty of endings. The marriage she had tried to sustain wasn't failing because of betrayal or wrongdoing. It was ending because it had already shifted. Because emotional absence cannot sustain love, and because some bonds quietly run their course. She embraced this understanding without bitterness, without regret. She realized that some closures don't come with loud arguments or dramatic revelations. They come with gentle awareness and self-respect. Lena began to live her days with intention. She explored old hobbies, reconnected with friends she had neglected, and allowed herself moments of stillness that she had long ignored. She walked through the city with her head held high, aware of her own presence, feeling the freedom of choosing her own emotional path. Each step, each choice reinforced the truth she had discovered. She didn't need someone else to define her worth. She was enough on her own. And then, one evening, as she stood again on the balcony that had once been the site of her quiet awakening, she felt a sense of peace. The city lights stretched before her, and the wind carried a gentle whisper of possibility. Her phone buzzed a message from Armand. "I hope you're doing okay." She smiled softly, not because she needed his reassurance, but because the message reminded her of the kind of connection she deserved. She didn't rush to reply. She didn't feel compelled to act. She simply felt gratitude for the clarity and calmness that had arrived in her life. That evening, Lena realized the power of quiet karma. Not revenge, not drama, not manipulation. Just life revealing itself in honest, gentle ways. The events of the party, the quiet conversations, the awareness of Daniel's absence, and the recognition of her own value, all of it had guided her to this space of emotional maturity. She understood that the unexpected twist of her life wasn't destructive. It was transformative. Lena didn't need to recreate her past or dwell on what had been lost. She didn't seek validation from anyone, not Daniel, not Armand, not anyone else. She had reclaimed her own heart. She had learned that the most profound changes often happen quietly, in moments of reflection, in decisions made without fanfare, and in the simple act of observing truth. Weeks passed, and Lena's life continued in this gentle rhythm. She didn't rush into relationships or force connections. She didn't seek closure from Daniel or demand explanations from him. She allowed reality to settle as it was, observing with calm awareness. Every day brought small joys: morning sunlight, the taste of coffee, a book that captured her imagination, a walk that felt freeing. Each moment became a testament to her resilience and her capacity for emotional growth. Eventually, Daniel understood the depth of the change. He could no longer rely on the old patterns that had kept Lena emotionally tethered. She had stepped into a space of self-respect and clarity, and he could not reclaim it through excuses or gestures. The realization was subtle but undeniable. The dynamic between them had shifted irreversibly. Lena's calmness was a reflection of her inner strength. And it was a truth Daniel could neither deny nor disrupt. Lena's heart remained open, but with discernment. She allowed herself to feel gratitude for Armand's kindness, but she did not depend on it. She recognized that emotional fulfillment comes from awareness, from choosing connections that are mutual, respectful, and nurturing. The quiet hope that had begun on that balcony had blossomed into a steady understanding of love, connection, and self-worth. Months later, Lena looked back on the events of the party and the weeks that followed with a sense of gentle amazement. Nothing dramatic had occurred. No explosive confrontation, no public humiliation, no rash decisions. Yet her life had changed profoundly. She had discovered the power of quiet awareness, the strength that comes from observing truth without judgment, and the liberation of reclaiming one's own heart. The city around her continued to hum with life, full of possibilities and quiet beauty. Lena walked through it with a steady gait, her heart unburdened, her mind clear, and her spirit calm. She understood that the night at the party, the connection with Armand, and the distance from Daniel had been gifts in disguise, lessons in awareness, clarity, and the quiet force of karma. It wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about truth, self-respect, and the transformative power of seeing life as it is.